The wire cleared on an ordinary Thursday morning, $1.4 million for a logistics routing company you had built alone in a spare bedroom over 9 years, coding after your day job ended, before anyone else in your life was awake to ask what you were doing in there. You did not celebrate. You stood in the kitchen with the phone still warm in your hand and the coffee maker still gurgling, and you did not feel like a different person yet, and that gap between the number and the feeling is exactly where this story starts. That gap is where we begin. Marcus was already at the door. He is 51, ex-military, built like a doorframe, and he has driven you to work and back for 11 months without once asking what the work actually was. That morning, he knelt on the porch mat, resetting the motion sensor light he had noticed flickering days earlier. He had no idea what had just happened on your phone. He did not ask if it was a good morning or a bad one. He asked if you wanted the porch light on the timer or the sensor, same as he would have asked a year ago. The wire moved 7 figures. The only person near you that morning was fixing a cheap light fixture with his own screwdriver. You told no one, not your mother, not the 2 friends who would understand what 1.4 million actually meant. You decided, standing there with the coffee going cold, that you would sit on the number for a while before it turned into a costume you had to wear in public. Then, 4 days later, an old coworker named Nate texted you out of nowhere. Heard you sold. We should catch up. You read it twice, because you had not posted anything and had not told anyone, and the only people who technically knew were 2 lawyers and a bank that had never heard of Nate. You almost typed who told you and deleted it, because you already understood something you would not be able to unlearn. Money is the one secret that tells itself. It does not need a mouth. It changes the way a room looks at you before you have said a single word in it. Marcus never asked. Not that week, not the week after, not once through the entire unraveling that followed. He drove you to the meetings with the lawyers and sat outside reading a paperback with a cracked spine, never glancing up like he was doing quiet math on what you were worth now. He is the only person left in your life who still does not know the actual number, and that has started to feel like the rarest thing you own. What you kept remembering instead was a night 11 years earlier when you were broke enough to hear your own refrigerator humming because there was nothing loud enough inside it to cover the sound. Your friend Dez, who had almost nothing himself that winter, drove clear across town in a car with a check engine light that never turned off and pressed the last 2 crumpled bills he had into your hand on your front step. He would not take it back. "Pay me when you are a millionaire," he said, laughing at his own joke like it was the safest bet in the world, built on the assumption it would never come due. You paid him back that spring out of a part-time check. He waved it off, half annoyed, said that was not the deal. For years it lived on as a story you told at his birthday every March. Word got out the way it always does, through somebody who could not hold it, and within 2 weeks your old circle threw you a party at Priya's apartment, folding chairs from 3 households. A playlist too loud through a speaker in the windowsill. For an hour you let yourself believe nothing had changed. Nate got to you by the drinks table, grinning, and said it loud enough for the room to catch. "Careful around this guy now. He will invoice you for parking." Everyone laughed. You laughed too, and that is the trap, because it wears the shape of affection so well you almost miss the weight underneath it. Then Nate leaned in, still smiling, and said the real thing dressed as a joke. "So when you start hiring, you will think of your people first, right? A joke is just how someone asks for a thing they do not have the nerve to ask for straight. A small open hand, tucked under every laugh in that room." Marcus stood near the door the whole night, watching the room the way he watches every room, and his face never moved once. You did not go looking for it. You were at the dealership for a recall notice when you saw Dez through the glass, out on the lot, walking a salesman down a row of trucks, the way a man walks when he wants an audience. He had not seen you yet, so you did the math you wished you did not know how to do. You knew his rent, his paycheck, to the dollar. The truck he was circling was not one he could carry for more than a few months before it started carrying him under. Then he spotted you and lit up. "Tell me this is not clean," he said, slapping the hood before you had even said hello. A week earlier, he had seen photos from your closing dinner, and this was his answer. 20 minutes of him selling himself a vehicle he did not want to impress a version of you that had never asked him for anything. The man who once handed you his last 2 crumpled bills was now spending money he did not have, so the gap between you would not show. By the time you got home, it was not just Des. Your old manager Ruth texted about a quick opportunity, said she just needed a little help getting something moving, said you would practically be doing her a favor. A cousin you had not spoken to in 2 years found your number. Someone in Priya's group chat started a sentence with, "Well, now that you can afford it," and it was not a question, it was a reclassification. Now you were a resource wearing a familiar face, and you had not spent a single dollar yet, and the asks were already stacking up like mail nobody wanted to open. You started keeping your phone face down on the counter, because every buzz now arrived with a small flare of dread about which version of a person was about to show up on the screen. Then Des called, not a text, an actual call, with a softness in his voice you had not heard in months, and he asked you to come by. You wanted so badly for it to be the old him that you said yes before you had even hung up. You sat at his kitchen table, the same table you had sat at 100 times broke together, and he was nervous in a way the man at the dealership had never once been. Then he said the number, $40,000. Under that table, 11 years quietly rearranged themselves. 40 then. 40,000 now. He was not really asking for a loan. In his own mind, he was collecting one. It cannot lose, he said those exact words, and laid out a plan that was mostly confidence and very little detail. For 1 second you almost said no, thinking about the slapped hood, the price said out loud, just to watch your face react. A quiet voice told you he wanted to be even, and you cannot buy a man even. You said yes anyway, not to the deal. To the face across the table, to the small chance that $40,000 could buy back the friend who once drove across town in the cold for you. For a while, it actually worked, and that is the part nobody warns you about, because it is the part that does the real damage. 2 weeks in, Des showed up on a Sunday morning with 2 coffees and no ask, said he had noticed your fence gate dragging on its hinge, and spent 3 hours fixing it without letting you pay for the hardware. Halfway through, he grinned the old grin, the real one, and said, "I am paying back every dollar, you know that." You believed him completely. That is exactly when it went. The call came the next Sunday. The deal that could not lose had lost, every dollar of it, and there was no apology, no mention of the 40,000 that had just evaporated. There was something new in his voice instead. He was not asking for more, not exactly. He was explaining why you were going to give it. The first 40 was just to get in the door, he said. Pulling out now wastes it. You would not even feel another 30. He said it like your money was a limb gone numb. You understood then that the gate hinge and the coffee and that grin had all happened after he already knew this deal was cracking. The favor was never a gift, it was a deposit, so you told him no. Your first real no to him, ever, and it came out softer than you meant it to, almost like an apology. He went quiet, said okay, said he understood, and hung up. For 2 days you thought the no had held. Then Priya called, and opened with a sentence that told you exactly who had gotten to her first. "Why are you doing this to him?" she said, and the question had already decided you were guilty before you said a word back. You tried to explain, the second ask dressed up as an explanation, and heard her go quiet, waiting, loading her next line. "He is struggling," she said, "and you have so much now." As if the number had changed what you owed anyone, as if love came with a sliding scale and yours had just gone up. You wanted to say he did not lose the money, he lit it on fire and called you for more gasoline. But you did not, because Priya was not being cruel, she was just standing where people like her always stand, between 2 versions of a friendship, and she had already decided which one needed defending. After that, it never became one confrontation. It just spread, quietly, the way these things always do. A text left unread for the first time in your life. Deacon, who used to call you champ, started calling you moneybags with a laugh that had a small hook buried inside it. None of it was big enough to point at. If you brought up any single piece of it out loud, you would sound paranoid. Rich and paranoid, the worst combination there is. So you said nothing and just felt the temperature of every room drop half a degree the moment you walked into it. Through all of it, Marcus kept doing his job like the job itself was the whole point, because to him it was. He drove you home from a meeting that ran late into a storm, and when you got out, he stood at the curb in the rain until you were safely inside with the porch light on, soaked clean through his suit jacket, waving off the umbrella you tried to hand back through the door. He never asked why you had gone quiet in the back seat some nights. He just showed up, stood post, and treated you exactly like the person from the apartment above the laundromat, the one thing in your life that had not shifted an inch. 3 weeks later, there was another gathering, a going-away dinner for a mutual friend, and you almost did not go. You sat in your car in the parking lot first, thinking about turning around, but going felt safer than the conversation your absence would start. For an hour, it was fine, Careful, but fine. Des sat across the table, quieter than you had ever seen him, a few drinks in, watching you the way a man watches something he has already decided about. Then someone asked how the new place was coming along, an ordinary question, and before you could answer, Des set down his fork. Must be nice, he said, not loud, he said it almost gently. The table did not go silent right away, people kept talking for a second before they felt it. He looked at you, no grin this time, no armor, just something tired and certain underneath it. You did not get rich, he said, you just stopped being one of us. He was not shouting it, he believed it, the way a person believes something they have carried a long time. Nobody at that table defended you, not because they agreed with him, because silence is easier than picking a side out loud, and silence, you were learning, is its own kind of answer. Only Marcus, standing by the coat rack near the door, did not move a single muscle in his face, and for one humiliating half-second, you wondered if Des was right. The call came 5 weeks later, on a Wednesday, which is how you will always remember it, because the day had no reason at all to be the day. It was the security agency, not Marcus himself, telling you he had been admitted to a hospital downtown the night before. You had not even known he worked a night shift you never asked for. You do not remember most of the drive, only the hallway at the end of it, the lights too bright, how loud your own shoes sounded against the floor. He was awake when you got there, a bandage over one eyebrow, ribs taped tight under a hospital gown, trying to sit himself up like he had somewhere else to be. He had told the nurses he was fine and told them not to call you, and they had called you anyway because the contract required it. You sat in the chair beside the bed and asked him the only thing you could get out. What happened? He waved it off the way he waves off everything, said it was nothing, said the other man looked worse. You did not leave. So eventually, in the plain voice of a man too tired to dress anything up, he told you. 3 nights earlier, a man had been waiting near your garage entrance during his last walk of the property, a man who had been offered real money by someone who already knew your new address and your new number, to leave the gate unlatched for one night and forget he had ever seen anything. Marcus did not leave it unlatched. He met the man at the gate instead, and it went physical fast, and Marcus put him down and called it in himself before anyone in the house had even woken up. He never told you. He had been coming to work every day after with tape wound tight under his shirt where you could not see it because he did not want fear sitting in the house with you, and he did not want you handing him a check either, as if the ribs had a price you could simply settle. When you asked who had offered the money, he said it did not matter anymore and clearly meant it. When you tried to give him a bonus, hazard pay, anything at all, he shook his head, almost annoyed you had offered. I was not going to put a number between us, he said. My job was never the money, it was you. The ones who never ask are the only ones who were never keeping score in the first place. Nothing got fixed after that. Not really. Des never paid back the $40,000. Priya never apologized for the phone call. Deacon still says money bags sometimes. Quieter now, like even he is not sure it is funny anymore. The world did not reset itself just because you finally understood it clearly. But the scorecard you had been keeping without meaning to went quiet somewhere deep inside you, because you finally knew exactly which kind of person each of them was, and you had stopped expecting any of them to turn out to be a different one. The money never changed the people standing around you. It only turned the lights on in a room you had been sitting in for years and showed you, all at once, who had actually had your back in the dark the whole time. Marcus was back on his feet in 3 weeks, moving slower, one arm still favoring the ribs, insisting he could drive the day the doctor cleared him and not one day earlier. You told him no. You picked him up instead, from the small house he rents on the edge of town, the one with a dog he almost never talks about, and a truck far older than the one Des leased just to impress you. You sat with him in his own kitchen for an hour that first Saturday, not because anything needed fixing, but because he had done exactly that for you 100 quiet times and never once called it a debt. You changed the oil in his truck yourself in his own driveway while he stood on the porch pretending not to watch, because the shop would have charged him $40 for a job worth about $10, and because it was never really about the $10 for him either. You did not ask for a single thing back. That is the whole language he had been speaking to you the entire time, the one that never keeps score, and you were only now learning how to speak it back to him. So here is the question this whole story leaves you sitting with, and it was never really about the money. When your own number finally clears, whatever number that turns out to be for you, who is the one person standing near you who would not even think to ask what it was? And once you find them, will you have been paying close enough attention all along to notice?